This winter, more than ever, with COVID-19 still circulating, we need help to reduce all avoidable risks. You can help protect the NHS, social care and loved ones by getting the flu vaccine. You may be eligible for the free vaccine at your GP or local pharmacy if you are over 65, pregnant or have a long-term condition. Find out if you are eligible at nhs.uk/staywell. Children up to Year 7 can get the free nasal spray at school or through their GP if they are below school age. If you are not eligible for the free vaccine, you can pay for it at your local pharmacy. The flu vaccination does not give you flu. It reduces the risk of catching flu as well as spreading it to others. If you had the vaccination in the past, that will not protect you as the flu strain changes every year, so you need to have a new one this year. It is also important to wash your hands often with warm water and soap. Use tissues when you cough or sneeze and bin used tissues as quickly as possible. Thank you for helping to protect yourself and loved ones this winter.
The three words I'd use to describe my role is team, rewarding and challenging.
Positive, team, supportive.
Three words I'd use to describe this job: gratifying, inspirational, challenging. Before this, I was a hairdresser, but I wanted to do more than make people feel good. I wanted to help change their lives. I'm now part of a team that does exactly that every day.
I spend my days talking to the residents of Nottinghamshire, their families and the support services that help them on a day-to-day basis. We're the front door to adult social care in Nottinghamshire, and we're responsible for taking the time to build a picture through talking with our residents about how they lead their lives, the things that they find difficult, the things that they can do, and also looking at how they wish to fulfil their lives to the best of their possibilities. In the 5 years of working here, I've learnt so much, particularly about social care. I had no previous experience in it, but through a really, really good training and induction plan, I was given all of the skills and information that I needed to be able to do my job. I've also been able to grow personally and within my career since then through a personally tailored plan of support and training to keep me going.
We're a really close-knit team and we thrive off helping the community of Nottinghamshire to live a valued and independent lifestyle. Every day is different and there's always new things to learn, which makes the role interesting and really exciting. At the end of the day, knowing that I've helped a number of people to have a better quality of life makes every day worthwhile.
I can really recommend being a foster carer for Notts County Council. There's always someone walking the journey alongside you, whether that's other foster carers or social workers. It really helps to provide stability and consistency for children who really need it, and that's really rewarding as a foster carer.
Roger and I have been fostering for 35 years. We do deal with challenges, but to say we've been doing it for 35 years to me proves that it's not impossible. We learn an awful lot from these young people, and even now we're still learning.
As a foster family, we care, we want to make a difference, and we get so much fulfilment from fostering. The satisfaction of making a difference is something that money can't buy. Just seeing the smiles on the children's faces and helping them reach their potential is wonderful.
We work as family workers within the fostering service for Nottinghamshire County Council.
I really enjoy my work. I really enjoy meeting lots of different foster carers.
You know, we get to know the families, we get to know the kids, and we care, basically. It's important that
Thank you, Chair. We are live. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Christine Goldstraw and I am the Chair of the Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Panel. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, which is being held remotely, broadcast live on YouTube and recorded in line with the requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020. Please do bear with us if we run into any technical difficulties today. The meeting will be adjourned temporarily if the live stream is broken at any point. In addition to myself, the panel members participating today are the Vice Chair, Councillor David Ellis, my fellow independent co-opted members, Leslie Dolby, Suma Harding and Bob Bourne-Newton. We then have our elected members. Representing the Executive Mayor of Mansfield, we have Councillor Richardson, Councillor Nagat Khan of Nottingham City Council, Councillor Scott Carlton of Newark and Sherwood District Council, Councillor Tony Eaton of Bassetlaw District Council, Councillor Rob Inglis of Rushcliffe Borough Council, Councillor Francis Perdue Horan of Nottinghamshire County Council, and Councillor Linda Woodings of Nottinghamshire City Council. As well as the members in attendance, we also have Mr. Paddy Tipping, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Emma Foodie, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, Mr. Craig Guilford, the Chief Constable, and Miss Rachel Barber, the Deputy Chief Constable. Also supporting them are Kevin Dennis, the Chief Executive of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, Charlie Radford, the Chief Finance Officer for the Office of PCC, Mark Kimberley, the Head of Finance for Nottinghamshire Police, and the panel's support officers from the County Council, Keith Ford, Joe Toomey and Peter Barker. I'll just point out, and I'm sure many of you are experienced now with these meetings, but not everyone has the raise your hand facility to indicate that they wish to speak or to ask a question. So we've got 3 or 4 people looking out for you to make sure we don't miss your hands raising, but if we do, please shout out if you want to make a point and we haven't spotted you. So if we could move to the agenda, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 23rd of November 2020. Can the minutes of the last meeting be agreed as a true and accurate record, please?
Yep. Councillor Woodings, did you have an issue to raise? Sorry.
Sorry, I was agreeing to accept the minutes.
That's fine. That's great. Thank you. I was just confirming.
Does anyone have any issues? No. Thank you. Then they're agreed. Can I ask for any apologies for absences, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies for absence from Councillor McRae, who's been experiencing some technical difficulties. We've also, as you've already mentioned, got apologies from Mayor Abrahams. And just to confirm, we've had a change of membership and Councillor Smith is now on the call as well. So Councillor Smith replaces Councillor Zadrozny as the Ashfield District Council member going forward. And I understand Councillor Zadrozny will be the name substitute. I think that was it in terms of the apologies. And just to underline, in terms of anyone following the meeting from the agenda pack, the representatives of the courts are unable to make the meeting today. So we've had apologies from all three people who are named within the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Keith, and welcome to Councillor Helen Smith. We're glad you're able to join us today as well. Any declarations of interest by members and officers, please? Do any members or officers have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? No? Do any have any private interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare? No, thank you. That takes us then to item 4 of our agenda, which is the work programme.
Excuse me, Helen Hand-Smith. Councillor Smith.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for a point of clarification, really, I know at the District Council and the County Council, members have to declare an interest when setting the budget as residents of Nottinghamshire or the district. I didn't know if we needed to do a blanket declaration for all members of the crime panel, seeing as we're discussing the increases of the police precept.
It's an interesting point, Chair. It's never been raised before. I will clarify the matter. If it turns out that is the case, Councillor Smith, I'm happy to take that as a blanket declaration. We will double check that issue, and if that is the case, we'll record it in the minutes accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you. Just prior to handing over to Keith Ford, could I just like to formally move the recommendation, which the Vice Chair will second?
I'll formally second that and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Mr. Keith Ford. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There isn't a great deal to highlight in the work programme report this time. The main point I wanted to draw members' attention to was around paragraph 6. So this followed on from previous discussions where we had looked at the best ways that the panel could deal with the police and crime delivery plan in terms of scrutinising that as part of the ongoing meetings of the panel. So the proposal, which is covered elsewhere on the agenda, so under the item on the police and crime delivery plan, there is a recommendation under that item that in future we'll move to a sort of 6-monthly reporting process rather than having each of the specific themes to individual meetings. So I'll park that until the item elsewhere on the agenda. I just wanted to flag that up because when it comes to the appendix, whereas we had been expecting the police and crime delivery plan to be reported to each meeting, it's currently shown as a tip to be confirmed. And the plan is if that proposal does get agreed, then we'll move to set some dates within the programme. Other than that, the other thing that's mentioned within the body of the report was just about if any members who had attended the virtual national conference, if anybody wanted to feedback. You'll no doubt recall when we last met in November, that was on the first day of the conference. So there was some initial feedback given, and it was just open if any other members or any of the support officers wanted to feedback further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Keith. Anyone wish to respond to the comments that Keith has made? I can't see any hands coming up, but probably we ought to just mention and record here. The conference had to be changed, obviously, because of COVID restrictions, and actually they held it over 3 days. And in fact, the opening speaker was indeed our own Police and Crime Commissioner. I think in all fairness to the company, they organised it extremely well, given the difficulties they'd had. And from what I know from other colleagues around the region, it was well received. Paddy, I don't know if there's anything you want to add as you were the guest speaker to kick it off.
Well, as always, members of the panels ask some difficult questions, and I welcome the challenge of that. I think it's also interesting to note, Christine, with it being held virtually, there were more people involved than previously.
Indeed, yes. Many people were able to tune in from home as opposed to attending and being restricted by the numbers of the venue. If there's no further questions, then can the recommendations be agreed, please? I'll just check whether anyone wishes to raise any issues either against this or not. No? Then thank you, that's carried. If we could move then to item 5, which is going to be really the main part of our discussions this afternoon. And prior to handing over to the Commissioner to introduce the item, I would just like to formally move the recommendations, which the Vice Chair will second.
Yeah, formally second and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before handing over to the Commissioner, because there's a lot of issues we'll be making comments about as we go through, but just to take this opportunity to thank the Commissioner and his team, the Chief Constable and team, for their written responses to a list of questions that we posed to them prior to today's meeting to enable greater understanding of the precept and the budget. So just wanted to record the panel's thanks to both teams for their support in enabling us to work our way through these. So over to you, Commissioner, please.
So, Christine, you've set out the purpose of this paper, which is right at the beginning, which is to request the panel to consider the proposition that the Bandee council tax should increase next year by £14.94 to £244.26. The police settlement, provisional police settlement, was sent out just before Christmas, and coincidentally, just before the meeting today, the policing minister must have known you were meeting. He's written to me today, kind of confirming the settlement. The issue won't be debated in Parliament until next week, but the figures that are set out in the report before Parliament are as we discuss them in December. And I think the Minister makes a couple of interesting points in his letter, one of which you raised as a matter of question, which was the funding formula review. It's very clear to me, and it's clear from the Minister's letter that that's not on the agenda just now. I had the opportunity to talk to him about this yesterday. I think it's clear that until we have a spending review, a proper spending review, hopefully next year, that the funding formula won't be considered. And the second point, and I think probably the more relevant and pertinent point, is that he believes that the proposition that's in the settlement for a £15 Bandee increase is an appropriate one. So let me just pull out some of the headlines from the host of papers that are in front of you, and we'll take some more questions. The settlement contains £703 million more next year than in the current year. The settlement provides two things really. First of all, it provides grant payment for the uplift of officers. Panel members will remember the Prime Minister's pledge, 20,000 officers over 3 years. In the current year, we're asked to provide 6,000 officers. In fact, although we're not at the end of this year, 6,600 officers, extra officers, have been recruited. Next year, the target was to recruit 8,000 officers, but because of the funding difficulties, that's been reduced to 6,000 officers. But there's money in the budget by way of grant to make that happen. But in effect, to enable that to happen, the council tax will need to increase to meet other demands. And again, as I said at the beginning, the proposition is that again, the council tax should rise. Within the settlement too, and again, this is something that the panel have talked about in questions, policing nationally is asked to make savings of £120 million in the coming year. 20 million of that will come from procurement through blue light commercial. Another 26 million is anticipated to come through better IT systems and in fact cutting off redundant systems. And here in Nottinghamshire, we're looking at making savings next year in the budget, and it's set out in the budget of £2.5 million. The current year, we set ourselves a saving target of £2 million. We will achieve that and slightly go over it. So what about the budget for next year? The budget we're proposing for next year is £233.2 million, of which £154.7 million is provided by way of government grant, and £78.5 million is raised locally by the precept. And cunning observers on the panel, and I know there are quite a few, will recognise that for the first time, the precept percentage being raised towards the budget is just over 50%. There's been a common theme from government around public spending that more should be raised locally and less provided by way of government grant. And as an example of that, when I came into office some years ago now, 70% of our income came by way of government grant, just 30% was raised locally. And as I say, over the years that's changed, and the important milestone is this year or the coming year, more than 50% will be raised locally. So what does that mean for council taxpayers? Well, we talked a lot about Band D properties, but let's just consider the situation locally. In the city of Nottingham, for example, 80% of all properties are either Band A or Band B. And the situation is mirrored in Ashfield and Mansfield, where Band A properties are the majority. So they're not being asked to raise £14 or £15. For a Band A property, the increase is just under £10. For a Band B, the proposition is that the increase should be 11.62 pence. So what do we get for that? Well, one of the things that the panel talked to me about, and certainly what the general public talked to me about, is more police officers. Even with the 20,000 extra officers promised, we won't be back to the position where we were 10 years ago. But police numbers are going up, and I'm very keen to work with partners and the government to make that happen. You'll see from the report that we've provided that by the 31st of March this year, in terms of full-time equivalent police officers, we'll have 2,169. And if the budget is increased by what we're proposing, we intend to recruit an extra 100 officers on top of that. So over a period of 3 years, we'll have recruited an extra 360 officers. Chief Constable is responsible for deployment, and you may want to comment on that. But of the 260 officers over the past 2 years, 70% of them have gone to frontline duties. Of the 100 that are proposed, 36 will go into Reacher teams, and the panel's taken a great deal of interest in that. 20 will go into CID, and 15 will be response officers. So again, the focus has been getting officers more visible out onto the front line. And I have to say, Nottinghamshire Police are highly regarded by the government in that we are well ahead of our recruitment. By the 31st of March this year, we'll have recruited all of next year's allocation of officers, and if we take the 100 on, we'll have appointed them a year in ahead as well. And in terms of proportionality, 25% of all police officers now are coming from BAME communities, and we're making real progress, and Craig and his colleagues are highly regarded across government for what they're doing. On top of that, you'll have seen from the report that we're going to maintain PCSO numbers at the current level, at 151, and I know a number of members of the panel have talked to me over the years about the importance of PCSOs, and you'll see that we intend to increase police staff by 63. Good proportion of those will be bringing back office services back in-house. We've talked a lot over the years about MFSS. We intend to be out of MFSS finally by November 2022, and hope to have a live programme, a shadow programme, operating from April 2022. So let me talk a little bit about one or two other things. One of the things I'm obliged to do is to consult the public on the precept rise. And unlike many PCCs, I don't hold an exercise around the budget. In fact, we talk to people on a quarterly basis. We're one of the few forces in the country, one of the few PCCs that regularly talk to the wider public. We speak to about 4,000 people a year by way of opinion poll survey. And what that tells us is that people want more officers. There's a demand for more officers. That's universal. But there's hesitancy about paying. People will pay more if they get more back, and we're going to be in a fortunate position here in Nottinghamshire this year that people are being asked to pay a bit more and will get more back. My colleagues in local government on the panel and elsewhere will face a situation where they're asking people to pay more, but because of the real financial constraints, they're going to get less. And that's quite a difficult sell. We also do some qualitative work as well. I've been very keen to use focus groups during my time in office. Panel members will have seen that we've had 3 focus groups brought together by an independent organisation who's talked to people about the police budget. And it reinforces what I've said, that people, when they understand the complexity of police funding, are prepared to pay more, provided they see more visibility. And alongside that, we know through our survey work that satisfaction for the police is increasing all the time. People are in a difficult position. The pandemic has caused hardship, and I'm very mindful of the position that many residents and families are in. And that's reflected in the council tax collection fund. Again, you'll see from the report that the collection funds that are organised by the district councils, who then distribute money to other bodies, the county council, the police, the fire service, their collection rates have gone down. And you'll have seen that the government have put in place a special scheme to recoup that money over a 3-year period. So that's a reflection of some of the difficulties that we've had to think through. There's a lot in the report, Christine, about reserves. We don't intend to use reserves to balance the budget this year. Over the past couple of years, we've been trying to increase the reserves for one specific purpose, and members will be mindful of the fact that we've got 2 big projects, building projects going on at the moment. One is a replacement of the Bridewell, It's on track and it's under budget, and Linda Woodies will be interested in this because it's close to the area that she represents. We hope to open that new facility in the summer, and it's been a good build, and I'm very confident that it's an environmentally sensitive build as well, and it's employed some local labour. We've got another project which the panel are interested in at Sherwood Lodge Police Headquarters. Again, that's a big project, and that won't open for another 18 months or so yet. But the savings from that, bringing the police and the fire service closer together in one building, but more particularly over a period of time, merging and melding the teams together will help us to make both savings for the police and fire. I've been very conscious that building projects like this are often financed by loan financing. We're near the limits of our borrowing powers, so building the reserves, selling off assets, putting into reserves makes both these projects achievable, and I'll be delighted when they're completed. So I'm conscious that I've spoken for nearly 20 minutes, Christine. Let me just conclude by saying both the Chief Constable and I, and more particularly, I think the Home Office and the Inspectorate believe that Nottinghamshire Police are in a good place. Police numbers are going up faster than I think almost everywhere else in the country, and crime is coming down. And again, the panel will have noticed that the latest crime figures were published only yesterday. What they show here in Nottinghamshire is that this year compared to last year, crime is down by 22%. Big falls in burglary, big falls in vehicle crime, and I'm particularly proud of the achievement that our 2 knife crime teams now are doing in bringing down knife crime by 11%. We need to be clear that knife crime's going up regionally. We need to be clear it's going up nationally, and we need to be delighted that we've been able to achieve that 11% reduction here in Nottinghamshire. So the good news is police numbers up, crime down, streets are safer, and I hope against that context the panel will discuss and approve the budget. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. As I said at the beginning, there are a significant number of appendices covering all aspects of the budget and the precept, and a number of questions that panel members did raise with the Commission, to which we've had the answers. But if I could open it now for any initial questions to the Commissioner, please. Councillor Ellis, please.
Thank you, and thank you to the Commissioner for that introduction and the extensive papers we've got in front of us. I've got a couple of related questions about efficiencies. So we've made efficiencies this year. We're still having to make efficiencies next year. Are you confident that they'll be delivered? And I can't find it now, but I've seen in here somewhere concerns elsewhere about reverse civilianisation. And I know how relatively easy it is for a chief constable to deploy uniformed officers into other roles. Are you confident that we will not see reverse civilianisation in Nottinghamshire if this budget's approved?
Well, David, as I said at the outset, the savings this year are £2 million. We'll achieve them and we'll slightly exceed them. Next year, the proposition is £2.5 million. I'm confident, and the details are in the paper, that we'll be able to achieve them as well. I think when we come to the spending review, which I hope will start the year after next, I guess we'll still be asked to make efficiency savings, but I'm confident that with a budget of £220 million, finding savings year on year of £2 million, I know it sounds like a big ask, are achievable, and is within our gift. There's no reverse civilianization here in Nottinghamshire. I know in Warwickshire, I know in Cambridgeshire, I know in other parts of the country that's happening. The extra uplift officers are displacing people, and they're taking jobs that civilians used to do. But the Chief Constable is very clear. He wants his officers out on the front line. We're able to achieve that here, and I'm confident that we'll go forward doing that.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Ellis, or are you satisfied with the response?
No, I'm happy with that response. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Well, I've got a couple, if no one else has. Well, first of all, really, it's just to pick up a point about the Chief Constable and some of his successes. I think it would be remiss if we didn't record the significant improvement in terms of the employment of people from BAME communities, and I think that should be formally recorded. And also, and this is just a personal comment, I very much enjoy watching Police Interceptors, and each time I watch it, it raises my confidence in Nottinghamshire Police considerably, and hope that other members are able to watch some of those programmes, because you can compare and contrast it with other forces who participate in that programme. But Commissioner, I've got two questions. One, you talked about the savings in the Bridewell project, not the Bridewell project, the police headquarters project. And you're saying that there's going to be significant savings there for bringing together certain functions of police and fire. How will those savings be distributed?
Do you want the answer now, Christine, or have you got your second question?
My second question was really to you and the Chief Constable. You talked about the crime figures down significantly. I think you said 22%.
Yep.
And I just wondered how much of that is attributable to so many of us being locked in our houses for 23 hours a day?
Okay, so let me start, and given the comments you made right at the beginning, we perhaps ask the Chief Constable Craig to take a bow when I've finished, a well-deserved bow, I ought to say. So in terms of the police headquarters, we both run, for example, a comms department, we both run HR departments, we both run finance departments, and not immediately, but over a period of time, they will come together and merge, and the savings, I think, will be distributed on a percentage of the budget. So our savings, our budget is in excess of £220 million. Speaking from memory, the fire budget is in the region slightly over £40 million, £42 million. Charlie will be able to remind me. So the savings will be distributed on a ratio basis, and we'll be in a position to do that. In terms of COVID, again, Craig will want to add to this, but crime was down before the lockdown started, has continued to go down, and we've got plans in place as we unlocked in the summer, for example, and we all remember the balmy days of August where we could go out and on holiday. It seems like a distant memory now. Again, there were plans in place for that. I'm particularly concerned about the effect of the lockdown on young people, young children, school-age children haven't been to school for 6 months. Many of them have been in situations that are, let me put it like this, not good. And I think we need to be in a position to respond. But Craig, you come forward and take a bow on the BAME issues and on interceptors, and perhaps remind the panel that you were told that it was unwise to bring camera crews into Nottinghamshire Police.
Well, Paddy, thanks for that introduction. First and foremost, I think, Christine, it's a team effort, isn't it? It's my office, Paddy's office. I'm sitting here with Rachel. We've got a good team. We're nicely lined up around the challenges. The recruitment side of things, I'm absolutely thrilled with, particularly the outreach work and some of the work that the individuals within Force, officers and staff, have done in working with the college and in pushing out the degree apprentice, pushing out the apprenticeship route, and also nurturing some of the talent that we've got. Because we've got 2 now superintendents who are from a BAME background, and I think that's really important. 4 years ago, the most senior officer was an inspector, so I think that's a tale on its own. And the other thing is to just make sure we keep that recruitment tap on, and that's why we're always talking about trying to stay ahead of the game, trying to make sure we recruit in advance, we take advantage of any Home Office initiatives and any initiatives that Paddy's able to secure through his work as chair of the APCC and working with the police minister. So I think that's the first bit. Secondly, interceptors, absolutely. I was advised that it wouldn't be a wise idea. I think that was on the back of coppers and some negative experiences. We did a body cam squad, which I thought showed the breadth of what we were doing as an organisation, particularly a lot of those mental health calls and a lot of the work we do to support vulnerable people and those without a voice. And then interceptors shows a little bit more of the teeth edge of what we do. So behind the scenes, COVID and everything else. So only last week we took another shotgun off the streets with quite a targeted operation and a very big quantity of ammunition. We keep doing those things in the background. So a lot of that is the iceberg that people don't see. And also just referencing what Paddy said about children, we are still taking lots of referrals. We are still arresting lots of paedophiles. Almost on a daily basis are we dealing with safeguarding issues to try and keep those vulnerable kids safe, as you would want and as I would want. And that goes on all the time. And the crime figures, you know, it was reducing before COVID, it's reduced during, and it will reduce after COVID. We're roughly double the national percentage. So the latest ONS stats are showing the region is down by about 3%, we're down 11%, but as of today, we're 22% down. And that isn't all explained by, you know, the nighttime economy not being open. That's a lot of hard work from the officers and staff. And as you've all commented, you know, a lot of the reacher staff in neighbourhoods have been able to respond to local issues quickly. And that's made quite a big difference. So my pleasing category of crime increase is drug dealing. But that's because you've given us the information and we've acted upon it. And every time we pot a drug dealer, we record a crime against them. Hence why the increase is.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Constable. I think I've got Councillor Francis Purdy-Horan who's raised his hand.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't think I have a question really. I've probably got a statement really for myself. And I just want to start by saying that I acknowledge that there's been a lot of hard work to improve results in Nottinghamshire Police over the years that I've been on the Crime and Police panel, and I suppose like many in Nottinghamshire, I've taken a keen interest in the recent programme on Channel 5, and I just want to contrast that with a few years ago. I think the national press were describing Nottingham as Shottingham, I think it was, with gun crime, and we've come such a long way, and I acknowledge the hard work that has gone into it. So well done, Craig, and well done, Paddy. and I have to say I'm quite proud to be a member of the Police and Crime Panel for that, because anybody who has spoken about it, I say, oh, I know him, and I'm just disappointed that I've not yet seen Paddy or Craig jump from some sort of building onto the bonnet of a police car in the vein of Starsky and Hutch, but maybe we'll see that one day. But seriously, thank you for all those efforts, and I've sat on the Police and Crime Panel, perhaps shall we say, ready to be persuaded by Paddy that the usual above inflation increases are justified, and in his current term, which is now, of course, not his fault, but been extended by a further year, we're looking at somewhere in the region of about 30% on top of what it was the last time he was elected. And I do have to slap your wrist, Paddy, because it's okay saying that, oh, a Band D is £9.96, not even a tenner. But of course, all of them, Band A, Band D, right up to Band H, it's 6.5% increase. And we're looking at CPI at 0.8 and RPI at 1.3. So let's split the difference and say that roughly inflation is around about 1 to 1.5%. So we've got a real increase this year of 5% on top of an increased grant from the government. And I fully accept that over recent years, the aim has been to reduce the central grant and to have more money from, as you've said, from local residents. But, in my adult lifetime, I've never known a time when the police budget has been reduced, when it's been stripped out as a part of the council tax. So we have year on year real increases. And I just think perhaps this was a year, and I think most other councils are probably thinking this carefully, because although we've all behaved on this panel without politics or political manoeuvring, I'm pleased to say, it's usually once a year we get round to where we all become a bit twitchy when it's about the money. And I think I've spent my whole weekend grappling with your 194 pages, extremely well written, well presented, a fantastic team behind you supporting you. But I'm sorry to say, and despite the well argued points in the report, at the end of the day, I'm struggling, and I don't think I can support a 6.5% increase. So sadly, I won't be voting to approve this budget today. Sorry.
So Francis, that's entirely what this debate is about, and I'm delighted that you make those comments. I'm delighted that you recognise the Starsky and Hutch qualities in both the Chief Constable and myself, and we will jump off a building, but Craig will go first, and I'll just see how he manages. I mean, I think you made the essential point that we've come a long way with Nottinghamshire Police over recent years. In the early days of my tenure, budgets in fact went down in real terms, and we've had to make cuts and savings. You've acknowledged that we've made progress. I've had a long discussion over many years with chief constables who in the early days of austerity used to say police numbers don't count. Well, police numbers do count, and I'm delighted that we've been able to put them up, and I'm delighted that the Prime Minister has made a pledge, 20,000 officers, and we work in partnership with him, and we're in front of him, and I also remind him of that fact. But if you want crime to go down, you need officers on the ground, and without an increase of this size, I'm sorry I wouldn't be able to deliver your extra officers. But these are difficult balancing acts to take place. The County Council will set its own budget fairly shortly. The recommendation from them, from a Bandy property, will be £45.90 compared with the £15. I know I know you're saying percentage, but what counts is what comes out of your pockets, and I look with interest, let me put it like this, at the proposals that the County Council make in a fortnight or so's time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Horan? Because I've got also Councillor Smith waiting, but do come back if you want to.
Well, just to clarify, Madam Chairman, that my understanding is the County Council will be going for 2.99%. So that's, you know, not even half the rate that Paddy's looking for.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, I think you've been waiting. Thank you. And then I've got Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I never thought I'd actually say this, but I agree with Councillor Horan on this. We've got a very similar viewpoint to this. I couldn't possibly support an increase in the precept, and I'll tell you why I couldn't. And it's the same reason which I'll be voting against it at Notts County Council and when it comes up to the budget at the District Council. Because at this moment in time, people are struggling. People are losing jobs. People are out of work. It's a time when we need to be pulling together, not increasing everything. And Paddy, I understand that, you know, people want more officers on the street. I want more officers on the street. The Reach teams have done some amazing work. I can't wait to go out with them for a day. I've been out with the Road Crime Unit. I've been out with the Neighbourhoods Unit. You know, they do some fantastic work. Again, on Interceptors, I've been watching it every week. They do, you know, the stuff that we're seeing on there is amazing. I've met some of those officers, and it's a case of, oh, I know you. And you can relate to it when you see people like that. But you made reference in your initial statement, Paddy, about the consultation response that we had back. And I've just got some concerns about that. Firstly, I'd like, if I've missed it somewhere, then please tell me. But I'd like to know the actual figures of the amount of people that responded to that consultation. Because I've spoken to people and said, have you heard about this consultation? No, I know nothing about it. So first of all, the actual numbers of people. But my other big concern is, I know you said 37.4% of people that took part in the consultation said that they'd be happy to increase it. But also, it's only 37.3% said no. And 30.8% of the amount of people that took part in the consultation said that they couldn't afford it. I know we're only talking, as you said, though, it works out as £9.86 for a Band A property. But that's a lot to some people that haven't got anything. And that's the reasons why I can't support this, Paddy. But like I say, it's nothing against the work that you do, nothing against the Nottinghamshire Police. I just can't support an increase at this time.
And that's the discussion for today, and it's a discussion that I'm very familiar with. And Helen, we had a discussion around this when I came up to Stanton Hill, when you could still walk around, when you were pressing me for more police officers and more resources in Stanton Hill, and you can't will the outcome without providing the resources, and that's the difficult balance that we've had to make. And I understand the points that you make about people being hard up and in difficulties, and I know from my own direct and near experience around that. In terms of consultation, as I said at the outset, I don't do what many other PCCs do, which is to have an online survey or a telephone survey just before setting the budget. Throughout the year, we run a survey on a quarterly basis, and we ask people a range of issues, one of which is around satisfaction of the police, and that's going up, and it's gone up fairly significantly. The other is about willingness to pay, and you're spot on. the number of people who've come back and said we're prepared to pay a bit more is just slightly in excess of the ones who don't. There's a big don't know element of about 25% of all people, and that's one of the things that I've been very keen to do over the years. As I said earlier on, I'm a great believer in focus groups. I'm sitting here with the Deputy Emma Foodie, who's done more focus groups than has had hot dinners. And when you sit down and talk to people, and I know you as an established councillor do this all the time, and explain things to people, I mean, I think the results of the consultation of the focus groups are quite interesting. The overwhelming feeling was, if you're spending the money wisely, if we're getting a return, if we're getting more officers on the ground, if we're reducing crime, then we're in favour of it. And we're fortunate, and you recognise this, we've been able to do all those things.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Smith?
No, I'm okay at the minute. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Then I've got Councillor Richardson and then Councillor Woodings at the moment. Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to comment that over the past few months, in my own particular ward, Pennymount Ward, I've experienced numerous problems with antisocial and low-level criminal behaviour. I spoke about this at the workshops recently, and I've had huge concerns in that area. And here again, coming from the workshops and listening to Craig, you know, the emphasis is putting on back onto neighbourhood policing, which we seem to have lost somewhat because of the austerity cuts from, you know, its inception in Mansfield anyway in 2007. I attended meetings then at Cairn, and I distinctly remember saying to him at the end of the meeting, you know, the neighbourhood policing model, the inspectors and sergeants and PCs and PCSOs, is a win-win for the police and the public, and that proved to be the case. Consistently from that time on, crime fell year on year, every year, until we hit that sort of plateau at the back end of the austerity cuts. And you're quite right. Central government use that as an excuse to say we don't need officers on the beat. Look, crime's still falling, but that were a legacy from the excellent work that, you know, the PCs on the beat. You know, I could get a phone call Saturday afternoon, and have done, and meet with a PC Saturday afternoon, and, you know, over an issue, vandalism or something like that. And so if we want to get back to that, if we need to get back to 20,000 frontline officers back on the front line, then we have to pay for it. And I'd be, you know, I'm looking forward to an increase in uniform presence on the estates in my area, because it's sorely needed for the, and Craig has recognised this in his report on antisocial behaviour, and I found that very pleasing indeed, that, you know, these extra resources are going to go into dealing with the low-level crime that my constituents anyway especially suffer from. And so I would be supporting the budget.
Well, Stuart, I'm very grateful for those comments. And as you rightly say, over the past 10 years, neighbourhood policing has been eroded and hollowed out. And over the past 2 to 3 years, we've been able to rebuild it. And we also have the advantage in Mansfield of having a quite remarkable neighbourhood inspector, Nick Butler. And given the concerns that you're raising, Craig and Rachel will arrange for Nick to have a discussion with you about the problems on your estate. We all want safe and secure neighbourhoods, and anything that we can do with you, and more particularly colleagues at the District Council who are good colleagues, who are good partners, we're keen to do it. And I don't know, Craig, whether you want to just add a word or two about your view of neighbourhood policing?
Yeah, absolutely, Paddy. I mean, the model is predicated upon it, and the majority of the resource we've pushed back towards neighbourhoods. So the Reacher teams are all under the neighbourhood inspectors. Every one of those 12 across the force has got a dedicated team. And part of the uplift for this next year is really angled at bolstering those even further. Because, Stuart, you're absolutely right. I'm on precisely the same page. It's some of those lower level issues in a neighbourhood, accessibility for local partners to speak to the cops and to get the job dealt with in partnership that's key.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Woodings at the moment.
Thank you. I mean, I just wanted to come in and say that, you know, it does alarm me that we won't, you know, that some of my colleagues on the Police and Crime Commission, I perfectly understand their reasoning, and I perfectly understand the difficulties that people have faced this year, but actually want to not dedicate resources to the police. Because I think the thing that we've learned in the last year is that frontline workers, and especially our police officers, have never been more needed at a time of a public health crisis. In the City Council at the moment, you know, the COVID costs, loss of income, loss of revenue, we've got a £28 million hole in our finances because of COVID, and we have no choice but to levy as much council tax as we can in order to fill that £30 million hole in our finances left by COVID. We're very grateful for the money the government's given us, but it hasn't covered the losses due to the pandemic. But, you know, what have we seen? We've seen a massive increase in street drug dealing, and people have never been more conscious of it than before. And Operation Reacher, which is going to need those extra resources to actually tackle that, because it's, you know, something that I have mentioned, sorry, Chair, on numerous occasions previously at Police and Crime Commissioner meetings over the last year. It, you know, it can really affect the morale and the community spirit of a neighbourhood if they see street drug dealing on their streets, in their neighbourhoods, with no action to tackle it. So Reacher works, and we desperately need those 36 extra police officers to work on the Reacher teams and go out into some of the neighbourhoods where, you know, people are really alarmed and frightened to see drug dealers pulling up in cars and dealing in broad daylight in front of them. So we do need to commit to that. We've had an increase in antisocial behaviour this year. A lot of that is to do with people in their homes. They've never been more conscious of what's going on in their neighbourhoods, in their communities, on their street. We've had an increase in noise complaints, and the police have been right there at the front line, stopping people who are not following the COVID restrictions that are necessary to stop this massive overwhelming of the National Health Service. And it's come now because of the second variant, but, you know, the police have helped us hold the line in the city on that. They've tackled a lot of the illicit parties and gatherings that were taking place. They've been out there and they've taken the action necessary, and they find those organising gatherings as well. So thank you to the police for doing that. And they get some of the most appalling, you know, some of my friends are police officers, and they get the most appalling reactions from members of the public. They've been spat at over the past year. So antisocial behaviour has increased in spite of the fact that there's been less nighttime economy. Other factors have come up. Look at the amount of scams that people are being bombarded with at the moment on emails, on text message scams, TV licensing emails coming through, click on this link, phishing emails, mimicking your bank, telling you your bank account's been breached. They have never been as high as before. And domestic violence, calls to domestic violence support services, which Paddy funds, you know, year on year, and all credit to Paddy for the amount of concentration of effort that he has put into providing vital domestic violence support services. Domestic violence, you know, has risen exponentially during the last year, and we haven't had the criminal courts process to actually progress those. So non-criminal actions have been what saved women's lives throughout the last 12 months. The support services, the helplines, the refuges, we've got move on accommodation in Nottingham as well, Equation, doing a load of prevention, how to, look after your neighbour, the extension of the sanctuary schemes. All of that has been absolutely vital in saving women's lives. I can't believe we're living in a time where the amount of women being killed every week by a partner and former partner has actually risen from the 2 a week that it's been at for the last 20 years. We're now at 3 a week, 3 women a week being killed by a partner or former partner, and it's because they've been locked down in their homes during a pandemic and unable to, felt unable to leave because there weren't other solutions available to them. So our domestic violence helpline, 24/7 helpline in Nottingham, has had a more than 150% increase in calls to that service, and Paddy actually funds and supports that. And we need to support those services as well, because we and everyone we know will know a woman who's been affected by domestic violence, 1 in 4 women, and that has increased over the last year. Women's lives have never been more at risk. So I do think that, this is a choice that the government has made, not to fund things centrally, but to push the cost of services down onto local authorities, giving them the option as to whether to raise a local tax or not. But in truth, there is no option because Nottingham has lost £270 million in yearly funding since 2010, and we have no option but to levy the additional amount that we're allowed to help fund adult social care. And that's never been more needed this year as well, with the increased costs of COVID. But this government has made a choice to push down funding of services, essential services, onto local taxpayers rather than taking it out of Treasury and income tax. And so therefore we are in Nottingham, we are going to support Paddy's budget today because we feel the services that the police provide to the safety of Nottingham citizens has never been more needed than it is now.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Linda, thank you very much for those comments. Let me make a couple of points and then I'll hand over to Emma on domestic violence, and then perhaps Craig, you'll come in at the end just to reassure Linda that we've taken the opportunity over recent months to really take the fight on drugs forward, and the number of arrests have gone up significantly. So Linda, you're right that antisocial behaviour has gone up. It's gone up by 50%. As you rightly say, in part that's because more people are at home, see what's going on the streets, and in particular, you're right to raise the issue of noise, which has the reports of which have risen really dramatically over recent months. You take me to a place that I have a discussion with the policing minister, because the policing minister is very keen to say to me that what matters is fighting crime, and of course it does. But if the last 10 months has taught us anything, it's that policing is much, much more than fighting crime, and it's reassuring people, it's being there at a time of crisis, and police are good at crisis, that's what they train for, but let's acknowledge that this crisis has gone on for 10 months now, and it really is wearing for people. Second point I wanted to make was about working with you and your colleagues at the City Council. We've had very helpful discussions with you in your housing role, with Naget community safety role, and with the leader and the chief executive of the City Council. And I know that you're going to have to face some really difficult decisions decisions over the next few weeks. We've made it very clear that we're prepared to move our resources around to work alongside you to try and mitigate the consequences of some of the decisions we'll have to make. So I'm really grateful for that support. And on that point, I'll just hand over to Emma.
Thanks, Paddy. Just to come in on some of the comments, Linda, that were made around domestic abuse, which, as you're saying, throughout the pandemic, we've seen a huge amount of demand on our local services, both commissioned and non-commissioned. You mentioned the helpline, which we fund locally, and I just had an email whilst we were on that, yes, calls last week compared to last year were 118% higher than they've previously been, and that's actually lower than it's been at some point, 118%. And we've really tried to do all that we can in terms of supporting services locally, but also trying to keep a focus on this nationally. We're really pleased to have the Domestic Abuse Commissioner join us a couple of weeks ago to meet services so that we could continue that conversation about the need for long-term sustainable funding. But in the meantime, we're doing all we can locally as well to support survivors, whether that's, as is mentioned in the papers, around the new domestic abuse car, which will be sent as a first response to domestic abuse incidents to have that intervention at as early a possible moment. Additionally, the perpetrator programme, which we're about to roll out, which partners have been involved in, and also there'll be an increase in the public protection unit with an additional adults team next year as well, which is all really welcome. And all of this, as we said, is in partnership. It's not just ourselves at the OPCC and the police, it's obviously everyone on this call and the organisations that they represent, so that we can all work together to have that whole system approach to this problem.
So Craig, perhaps you just give Linda some figures around what you've been doing on drugs. It's quite a good story, I think.
Yeah, I think you'll see within the papers, Paddy, there's a little update with regards to the Reacher teams and how many actual drug dealer sort of situations they've dealt with, how many arrests they've had. And also, if you look at the interceptors, you'll see quite often some of our frequently flying ops resources are really getting stuck into the drug dealers. And I think, just on the part of the report, it mentioned around 731 arrests, 344 vehicles, 700 pieces of intelligence, nearly £500,000 worth of cash. And all that is ploughed back in wherever we possibly can to the prevention agenda, etc. And I think it's important that we recognise that we are reliant on the information that comes from the community. We are structured in such a way that we make it work and make it easy. We respond to the intel quickly, and we are absolutely committed to getting hold of those dealers and to put them through the criminal justice process. And that's not just the street dealers, but it's also those that deal in multi-kilo amounts. So we're trying to get upstream as much as we're doing street, as much as we're doing very local. And the community's help is vital in making sure that we are as good as we can be for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Craig.
So we had a major arrest in Baseford Ward a few weeks ago, and I was very grateful, as were the local residents who actually reported it through and supplied photographs and evidence to help that. So it was really great work.
Thank you, Councillor Woodings. Are there any other questions at the moment? Thank you. We've got Councillor Inglis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's difficult. We've got to get a balance right, haven't we, on this? Operationally, as Paddy has alluded, that the force is moving forwards. The precept is to take the force forward yet again, which we need to support. We look at the demand the police are under; it's huge. We go back to the figures in 2000. I mean, I know the workload on officers then was huge, so I'd hate to think what it is these days for them and what they've got to face. So we need to be providing that strength on the front line, give them the tools to do the job. We look at the sale of buildings and the jewels that have gone. We're looking at losing Hucknall, West Bridgeford, the training centre. There's another one, isn't there? Carlton's gone. All that revenue that's been generated, and we're still talking about building the reserves. Where's that going to go to? I know, Paddy, you alluded the sale of Westbridge was going to go to frontline policing, but there seems to be a lot of sale of property being generated towards the budget. Again, I'm pretty much on the fence with this. Yes, I really want to support personally. You know, I'd be happy paying £20, £30 towards policing because it's there, it's needed. You know, we need to get on. We've had fantastic results. They need to come on. We know that we want that presence of strength on the streets to be able to deal with anything. So I'm in full support for that, but I do find it difficult, as been mentioned before, of this 6.5% increase. And it's trying to get that balance right. You know, we're here to represent the community and the county to justify this rise. As you said, we're ahead of recruitment. You're 60 officers ahead. But then Paddy is saying, you know, you want this money to fund 100 more officers. So we're ahead of the game already. So can we justify that we need these extra 100 officers? And I'm saying two things because I really don't know. I want the police force to be as strong as we can. I want to be able to pick the phone up and have an officer here within a few minutes if needed. So we need that strength. So it's a difficult one.
So Rob, it is a difficult one, and I share that. Let me just talk a little bit about property sales, and you've mentioned a few of them. The Hucknall police station is being cleared out as we speak and will be sold. What replaces it? We're in a tri-service hub, the neighbourhood team, the response team, alongside the fire service and the ambulance service, and a really good arterial point in Hucknall. And that's a big revenue saving, not just for the police, but for fire and ambulance as well. And it's that kind of efficiency that we need to be driving at. I'd be quite sad. I was there just the other day to see the big West Bridgford police station go. But again, we can arrange for you to go and have a look at it. We'll be delighted to take you around the new station at Loughborough Road, where we are with the fire service, has reduced our costs. In terms of operation, Inspector Berry actually thinks it's a better site because it's on the main Loughborough Road there, and he can get out. And I'm just reflecting, earlier on this week, I had people contacting me from Rushcliffe about problems on the Crompton Acres estate. And again, because we've been able to reduce the footprint and reduce the revenue costs of the police, we're able to invest more in new officers. And one of the things that the pandemic has shown us is that we need to use technology more than we have in the past. So our use of laptops has gone up quite remarkably. Very shortly, over the next couple of years, we'll have a new generation of mobiles, of handsets. We haven't got the design yet, but people are working on it. And I know perhaps Craig just would like to comment on this a bit. I know he's seen as a bit of a tartar. He goes around the police stations and he asks officers what they're doing in there rather than being outside on the job. But it's those kind of hard choices about priorities. Do we want a big estate? Well, yeah, we want an estate that works for us. But do we want more bobbies than buildings? We talk to the public often about this, and overwhelmingly they're in favour of more officers rather than a bigger estate. So I'll stop at that point. And Craig, do you just want to say a word or two around getting people out on patrol?
Yes, Paddy, I like the description, but it'd be wrong if there was a lot of people sitting in buildings, and we've got the technology to have people out there, and that's something that we push as a command team all the time. We've invested in the technology. It's been really good during COVID, particularly if people have had to self-isolate, been able to work from home more easily, but also what it's enabled us to do is to get to more jobs quickly, to be more mobile, etc. And as Paddy said, I'm really keen on the non-pay costs. David asked one of the first questions this afternoon around efficiencies. Estate is a good area to make efficiencies because then I can maximise, a bit like Helen said before, you know, trying to make employment opportunities for people. Yeah, we are going to grow as an organisation. They will be local jobs. I'm really keen on that. I'm keen on generating young jobs and apprenticeships for young people because that's part of the future. And at the same time, I'm taking on officers and staff. And I think that's the right thing to do and not reverse officerising any of those posts. So I think less square feet, more on the beat is where we need to be.
Thank you very much. Councillor Evans, did you want to come back, having heard the responses to your comments?
No, definitely. I think, you know, people on the street is what's needed, and you can't quantify the good that does. You know, you can have a patrol car parked up on an A road, parked there all day. It might not generate any tickets or stop anyone, but that presence may have stopped a crash or something else, slowed people down. They get the message. You know, we need that presence. We definitely do.
So, Rob, that gives me the opportunity to bring Craig back in on roads policing, which has been denuded over recent years, but over the last couple of years, we've been building it back up. And again, Craig, maybe you'd say a word or two about that and maybe link it with armed officers.
Yeah, thanks, Paddy. The armed crime team is growing, but it just doesn't do firearms. And some of you have seen it at headquarters, and there'll be an open invite post-COVID to come and have another look. But what we've done is we've deliberately increased its reach. So there's a lot of very experienced advanced drivers that are doing more of the road crime stuff than we have done in the past. And in just the same way as we've increased the teeth on neighbourhoods, I've deliberately tried to increase the teeth around some of the roads policing aspects, which fell by the wayside to a degree at the start of austerity. So we don't deliberately go and target motorists. We do deliberately target criminals who are using the roads. And we also try and patrol where the community have told us there's some hot spots with regards to accidents or speeding. And that's where we try and influence the vans being deployed too. But broadly, the investment, and you will have seen some recently, Rob, you asked me last time about the advanced vehicles. We've invested in some of those 530 Tourers, the all-wheel drives. Really good deal on those, and we've run some more of those out across roads policing. And you also asked me last time about the Reacher vehicles, and we've just signed off some increased number of Reacher vehicles, and some of those also will sort of hit the green agenda. So half of the last 10 that we've actually ordered are dual, so they're electric and conventional fuel. So we're actually trying to push that agenda at the same time. So broadly, the roads are a good environment for us to patrol. We want to be out there. Paddy's done very well in investing in some of the Towns Fund bids, particularly around ANPR, and we're good at responding to it. And obviously everybody's watched interceptors. They have the laptop going, it's pinging all the time, and they are on the job where we want them to be.
Yeah, definitely. As long as we're not going back to cardboard cutouts of police cars on bridges.
Definitely not.
Thank you.
Can I check if there's any other questions on this particular topic? I'm not. Oh, yes, I'm seeing Councillor Purdy-Horan wanting to come back in. Hello, can you hear us, Councillor Purdy-Horan? We've seen your hand come up.
Sorry, I forgot to turn on my mic. May I request a recorded vote, please?
Yes, when we get to it, yes, I think there's probably still questions yet, but yes, we'll note that. Thank you, Councillor. Did I see Councillor Helen Smith? Were you asking to come in, Helen?
No, I was just going to ask for a recorded vote, the same as Councillor
Helen. Thanks. Well, before moving to that point, I've got one final question that I'd like to put to the Commissioner, if I may. Commissioner, you have a national role, which obviously gives you some advantages, I'm sure, in understanding what the landscape is across the country in terms of the uplift of the precept. Is there any information that you're able to share with us, obviously anonymously? We're just wondering, well, I'm just wondering what the landscape is.
So there are advantages and disadvantages of being a national figure as well, Christine. The advantage is that I do get access to quite a lot of information. Derbyshire, for example, agreed their precept this morning. Leicestershire agreed it last week. Both were in favour of the £15 on the Band D, but in excess of 70 police and crime, 70% of police and crime commissioners are recommending the £15 increase. And just for the sake of Francis, I'll just wave the letter that I've got in front of me. Arrived at lunchtime, Francis, from the policing minister, basically saying, Paddy, I think the £15 uplift on a Band D is a good thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If there are no further questions then, we've noted that people have asked for recording of votes, and I'll check that process in a moment with our learned democratic officers. But first of all, given the importance of the matters that have been debated and obviously the different views that have been commented upon, I'm going to ask Keith to call out names alphabetically so that we can record people's vote. Keith, is there anything you'd like to add to that before you start the vote?
No, that's fine, Chair. Thank you. I will start with Councillor Scott Carlton.
Against.
And Leslie Dolby.
For.
Councillor Eaton.
For.
Councillor Ellis.
For.
Christine Goldstraw.
For.
Suma Harding.
For.
Councillor Inglis.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Purdue Horan.
Against.
Councillor Richardson.
For.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Bob Vaughan Newton.
For.
And Councillor Woodings.
For.
Thank you, Chair. I make that it was carried by 10 votes to 3 against.
Thank you very much. And you've noted that people asked that those be recorded, didn't you, Keith?
Yes, I've got that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Then if we can move back to the agenda, we're now at item 6, which is the update to the Police and Crime Delivery Plan from the Commissioner, and it starts at page 157, I think.
So Christine, Keith introduced this right at the beginning. What we're proposing is that we bring the delivery plan to the panel, not at every meeting, but twice yearly. There's an appendix that sets out or revises things that are in the delivery plan at the moment. We won't produce a new police and crime plan until there's a new commissioner after an election, which I hope is going to be on the May the 6th, but I wouldn't put money on it. And I think that's all I need to say at this point. I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We have certainly run the idea of the 2 reports a year past a number of members that we've managed to catch up with on an individual basis, and also through the couple of workshops that we had recently. Any questions to the Commissioner? Can the recommendations be agreed then?
Agreed.
Thank you. That is carried then. That takes us then to item 7 on the agenda. And prior to handing over to the Commissioner to introduce the item, could I formally move the recommendations, which I understand the Vice Chair will second?
Yeah, formally second, reserve the right to speak. Okay.
Thank you.
So, Christine, there's quite a lot in this report, and let me just highlight one or two of the things. First of all, there's a good section at the beginning around missing persons. The force have put a lot of thought and a lot of work into this, and you'll see as a result of that, missing person investigations, which are quite costly, have gone down by 19%, and at-risk individuals, and those are to some extent young people in residential care systems or foster care situations, have gone down by 15% as well. There's a good section on antisocial behaviour that we talked about earlier on. There's the new safe command and control system that's been introduced. It's not been without one or two glitches, and COVID and the need to keep staff secure has made the issue of control rooms quite hard and quite difficult. But you can see that we're saying we'll be on top of the system by March. There's a long and interesting section on drone technology. You can see that the force are going to acquire another drone. I think in the longer term we'll acquire even more drones. There's a very lively discussion going on at the moment around the National Police Air Service and the effect that drone technology might have on that in the slightly longer term. Keen to point out to Councillor Smith that we've recorded the walkabout around Stanton Hill. I always like going to Stanton Hill. It's a community that's got its own characteristics, and I'm very keen to work closely with partners in Ashfield, not just around Stanton Hill, but there are a number of spots in the district where by working together we can do an awful lot more. There's a section on safer streets, and in particular the work that we're doing primarily with Newark and Sherwood District Council on a safer streets initiative there in the middle of town. That's been funded by the government at £550 million. The policing minister visited Newark virtually last week, was very impressed with the work that we were doing really around lifting the environment, target hardening in Newark. A second phase of safer streets has just been announced. We'll bid here in Nottinghamshire. I think we're in quite a strong position. The results won't come out until later on in the year. There's a mention of the PCC review. I anticipate, I won't put it any higher than that, Christine, I anticipate that it's going to be published next Thursday, but I've been wrong on the date before. I discussed it with the Home Office only yesterday. I think the interesting thing about phase one of the PCC review will be around raising the profile of PCCs, promoting best practice. I think part two will be the more interesting bit, which is around joining up the criminal justice system at a local basis a lot better than we do at the moment, in particular closer working with probation, which Christine, you've been historically involved with, better involvement with the youth offending teams and early intervention, and we'll have an opportunity on the next item to talk about joint working with the court service and the CPS. And then, as people have acknowledged, there's quite a comprehensive report on Reacher, which is reaching out and making a difference, making good results, taking people into custody, doing quite a lot of work around community rehabilitation. But I think the thing that has impressed me most about the Reacher teams is the way they've engaged with social media, tweeting, Facebook, really trying to pull communities together. So I'll stop on that point and take any questions, and I'm sure Craig will help me on some of the more operational issues.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. This is I thought this was a really good read. Thank you for what's going on across the county. After wading through the 100 and whatever it was pages of budget information, it was a good dose of reality, I think. Councillor Ellis, had you got your hand up too? Sorry, I'm seeing things now.
Yeah.
Has anyone?
No, my hand is up. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and thanks for the report, Paddy. A couple of comments on the question. I endorse what you said about Operation Reacher. I mean, in Gedling, it's just celebrated its first anniversary. It's been a very successful year, and like you, I quite like the idiosyncratic sense of humour that they display on social media. The article on drones was interesting. And I've seen on police interceptors when it's a race between a police dog and a drone to capture somebody. Did I understand from the incident that's going on in the River Trent that we've now got an underwater drone, or is that we've borrowed? But the real question, you mentioned earlier on about the ONS crime statistics, and one of the things they highlighted was a 10% increase in domestic abuse. Now, I don't know what the last we heard, the local picture wasn't that bad. I did look on your website for the performance and insight paper, and I couldn't see a recent one. Is that something that's maybe slipped with everything else that's going on? Thank you.
So the underwater drone that's being used at Hoveringham, where there's been a tragic incident, doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the Environment Agency, who are working closely with the police, the ambulance service and the fire service. Again, I think the work at Hoveringham really illustrates the importance of the fire service and the police service, both of which are involved in aquatic ventures working together. In terms of domestic violence, although Emma and Linda Woodings earlier pointed it out, calls for help to the helplines have gone up significantly, but both nationally and here in Nottinghamshire, the number of reports to the police have remained basically the same, if not slightly down. Whether as we come out of lockdown that will increase is something that we speculate about that, but it's something clearly we need to keep a close watch on. And I'm sorry if there's nothing in the papers. We'll go away and have a look at it.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Ellis?
No. Thank you for that, Paddy.
Any other questions to the Commissioner on this paper? In that case, can the recommendations... Oh, sorry, I think Councillor Smith, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a couple of comments that I wanted to make, and then I'll go into a question afterwards. The first one, in reference to using drones, I think it is a very good tool that the police can use. I know it's been quite effective in certain areas in my district when it comes to pinpointing where we've got cannabis grows, because the heat signature that it gives off, and we had some intelligence around a particular property, but it wasn't enough intelligence, but it was enough for us to get the drone up. That confirmed it, so the police were able to serve a warrant on it within a couple of days, and we did get half a dozen plants out of it. So it wasn't a massive grow, but it was one that was affecting the neighbours on the street. So that's some really good work. And I don't think we'd have been able to have done that as well as we did without the use of the drone. So that's the first thing. And the other thing I want to say is, at the last meeting, Paddy, I asked for a breakdown of the ASB related incidents between what's COVID related and non-COVID related. So I just wanted to thank you for that, because I did get that data at the last crime partnership meeting that we had with Mansfield District Council, which do give some quite interesting reading. But my question is, on paragraph 3.5, 4 on page 2, it states that while overall levels of police recorded at ASB increased by 43% during 2020, this was primarily driven by police enforcement of coronavirus restrictions. Operation, is it Bion? Have I said that right? Yeah, during that period. I was just wondering, did we receive any funding from government towards Operation Bion? And have Nottinghamshire Police done an analysis, to look at the huge surge in coronavirus-related calls? Thank you.
So I'm pleased that you've been impressed with the drones. I'm pleased that we gave you the breakdown on ASB figures. And as I said earlier on, Helen, they have gone up by about 50% here in Nottinghamshire, mirrored by 50% nationally. A lot of that is COVID-related issues. In terms of money, you're on the button. I had a discussion earlier this week with colleagues at the Home Office about extra money for patrolling for COVID. We were £30 million was made available in the summer for this. £30 million went to local authorities, and there is some work going on. I know not all local authorities got a share of the £30 million, but some work going on to see how effective that money had been. You're right, we're out of the £30 million now. The campaign is to further financial injection early part of the next financial year, beginning in April. Those discussions are live. Do I think we'll get something? Yes, I do. Do I think it'll be £30 million? I think we'll be pushing it a bit to get that sum of money. Craig, do you just want to give us a budget update on funding?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the debate is we're just waiting the outcome in terms of future. But last summer, we got just around 500k, and most of the local authorities got some enforcement money. So I would think most of the local authorities should still have some of that money because it's mainly ourselves that have been leading on the enforcement. And, you know, contrary to popular belief, the tickets go into a central pot. They don't come anywhere else. So there's no incentive whatsoever, as has been suggested in some quarters. So I fund the Operation Buy-On through core budget. So we reallocate resources regularly, and we make sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time. Obviously, for the house parties and stuff like that, you need quite a bit of resource to, let's say, contain the gathering.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Smith, or was that? Okay, thank you. I've got Leslie Dalby and then Councillor Woodings.
Thank you. I think my question's been answered actually, because I've had a look at the narrative again above the Operation Reach data, and I could see a huge variation, but I think that's generally down to the fact that the teams haven't been in place for the same length of time, have they? No. I think I've answered my own question, so thank you.
So Leslie, you're exactly right. The initial team was in Bestwood. It then moved, as David Ellis has said, into Gedling, and it's been rolled out to all 11 neighbourhood inspectors. They're not all quite up to establishment, but they're there or thereabouts. And as we said earlier on in the discussion, extra resources are going into Reach now that we've agreed the budget for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Leslie. I've got Councillor Woodings and then Councillor Khan.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to repeat what I said under the budget actually about Operation Reach. We're really delighted that that scheme is being expanded, and you know the incredible transformation on the Bestwood estate in Nottingham has been fantastic, and I'm really pleased that that's coming out to bolster neighbourhood policing teams. On the issue of this increase in fraud and people being defrauded of their money by phone calls, asking for bank account numbers and emails with links on them and online scams. I just wondered, you know, there is a prevention job to be done here. I think trading standards are doing what they can as far as that's concerned, but the police have a more powerful voice in this. And I wondered if you were looking at a more sort of like an enhanced comms plan from the Notts Police about, you know, maybe some little mini videos or something like that, warning people about phishing emails, and not to give their bank account details to anyone, even though, you know, they've made it sound like an emergency. Because I think that has been sort of like, almost feels to me like the crime of 2020 and going forward, is that people are at home, they're online a lot more, perhaps, if that was even possible. And we've seen an increase in people being deprived of their, you know, life savings effectively. It's really cruel, a cruel crime to commit against people who are usually vulnerable and sort of not savvy to pick up on those. And some very savvy people have been caught out by it as well, actually, I should say. But the other thing I want to talk about is domestic violence. I mean, we obviously have an increase in domestic violence reports. And when we do that, Paddy, I'm going to be a bit mischievous here. You do normally say, well, that, and Craig as well echoes it, to say, well, that's because there's been an increase in confidence in the police. So increases in domestic violence reporting shows and demonstrates an increase in confidence in the police. Well, last year we have this really concerning difference between the referrals to support services in the non-criminal route and actually reports to the police as well. It's a shame that our colleagues aren't here from the court service, because I do wonder if the well-known backlog in the court service is actually hindering and actually either people coming forward and reporting in the first place, or actually, you know, we're not having the results on, and I think understanding from the court system the results from domestic violence prosecutions. I just feel that there is a real gap there, and I'd like to hear from perhaps your deputy, Emma, who I know is specialising in this area, as to what we think might be behind this. I know this time last year there was talk about, during the March lockdown, of having a live chat service, and so that people could text rather than have to phone through for service. But if they're finding the capability to phone through support services, so maybe it's not the issue of being able to phone through. That's not something, if you're obviously stuck in a house, in a property, with, you know, your abuser, then what do we think that disconnect has been between actual cries for help to the support service and the police actually turning up and arresting somebody and prosecuting them?
But Paddy, could we perhaps hold Linda's comments around the domestic violence in the round, as it were, and pick that up when you and Emma pick up the courts issue, so that we can have the full debate around that? I don't know whether you want. I don't want to cut you off, Linda.
Yeah, I don't know whether they're linked or not, though.
No,
Exactly.
Christine, we can.
Yeah.
Christine, we can certainly link them, and we'll pick it up in the next section. Just in terms of reach, thanks for your comments, Linda. In terms of fraud, again, I think you're in the right place. The way we deal with fraud is being reviewed at the moment. There is some extra resources going into the City of London Police that leads on fraud. Some of that resource will gravitate down out of London into the regions. But I think when you say the way forward on this is around prevention, I think that's absolutely right, and that's a priority that's growing more for us. We do have people within the force who work around prevention. We're just about to kick off a fraud internet piece of work with schools at the moment, and I'll ensure, Linda, that you're sent the details of that, because I know you'll be interested in it. And as we say, Christine, we'll leave the domestic violence to the next session, if that's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Khan, did you want to come in? I know you've been waiting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mine was just following on from Councillor Smith's question about ASB, and I know in your quarterly police and crime survey, noisy neighbours had come up as the #1 issue around ASB. I just wanted to ask also, I know you launched, was it Operation Fossil on the 1st of January, and that was a new pilot intervention to try to resolve neighbourhood-based incidents. I know that around hate as well, but I just thought, how is that going?
I get confused, Nick, with all these operations, this, that, and the other, and I'm sometimes wonder how they get the names. So I'm going to have to ask Operation Fossil to pass it over to Craig, if that's all right. But nationally, and locally, the number of people dialing 101 around antisocial behaviour has increased. And the reason I think it's increased is twofold. First of all, people are at home and are much more aware of what's going on in their streets and in their neighbourhood. And as they're at home, they pick up noise issues quite a lot. I've always taken the view that we don't deal with noise as effectively as we should do. I take some responsibility for the police. Of course, the City Council have been very actively involved in this over the years. And I know you and your colleagues have got some plans, difficult as it might be, to do some more work around noise, and we'd be keen to work alongside you on that. But in terms of Operation Fossil, Craig, can you help me out?
I can't help you out with numbers, Nagat, but what I will do is I'll get Matt to just drop you an update. But broadly, what we try to do with a lot of the noise stuff is to link it to the Operation Buy-On. So with the COVID stuff, because you normally get the first sniff of a noise of one of those big parties. And I think where we've tried to make an impact together, that's been really good. So City Council team and the cops, you giving them a warning, and if they don't play ball, we come in with a ticket, and that seems to be the right proportionate approach. And then just very briefly on fraud, Linda, I think we're the 6th highest prosecuting force for fraud in the country for our referrals that we get through from the City of London, which is a great place to be. We did.
How many is that though?
It's definitely into the hundreds, okay. And I will get a little note together because it's a real good news story. We do have, last year we did invest, Paddy's right, in changing the structure slightly, and we've put more dedicated resources into fraud, and we also have 2 outreach workers. So that's on the prevention side, and you've been absolutely bob on in trying to pick off some of those repeat ones, particularly with older people, but also for some people that have been scammed on the dating websites, etc. So I'll drop you a note with that.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Khan?
Yeah, I did actually. And it was just on the point of, in the report, it talks about calls to 999 emergency services have begun to fall for the first time in 2 years. It also talks in the report about the 101 number has also continued to see a decline, but we've seen the reporting of ASB and everything go up. So, but it talks about the national crime recording standards. So I wasn't clear on that.
So, Nigat, the national crime reporting standards are different from the other 2 things, the 101 and the 999. The inspectorate, HMIC, FRS, have been inspecting every police force to see how well they record crime. And I know you follow the news very closely. I kind of keep a close watch on the Khan household just up my road, but you'll have seen the controversy recently in Greater Manchester, where crimes haven't been recorded and where there's been an awful lot of criticism of them. Our recording standards have gone up. They're pretty high, as well as the outside inspection. We do internal audit, and we're pretty confident that we're there or thereabouts. Never always get it right. In terms of 999 calls, we have a heavy workload compared to other parts of the country. 101, our performance has improved. Later this year, the 101 service is going to be retendered. And there's a lot of thinking going on at the moment about how that new service might look. If you remember, you're probably too young to remember this. When we started on 101, it was going to be a comprehensive service, an open door service to all public bodies. That proved too difficult, and so it was just a police 101 number. What's being looked at is going back to that comprehensive approach, because nationally 80% of the calls that come into 101 have got nothing to do with the police whatsoever. So we're acting as a gateway to other organisations, and we'll need to do quite a lot of hard work and hard thinking on this before we go out for tender in the autumn. And I'd be very interested, and I'll make it a priority to ensure that local authorities are consulted on this, because clearly it's really relevant to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other questions on this particular topic? If not, can the recommendations be agreed? Thank you. Can I check whether there are any abstentions or against this particular item? In that case, thank you. That's carried. That takes us then to item 8, our final report this afternoon, which is on the Courts and Criminal Justice Recovery Plan update. As mentioned earlier, we had expected to have 2 or 3 members of the Courts and Tribunal Service attend this afternoon, but for some reason they were unable to come today. The paper starts at page 187 in your bundle. Prior to handing over to the Commissioner to introduce this item, I would just like to formally move the recommendations, which I understand the Vice Chair will second.
Yes, formally second and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paddy, are you leading on this, or is more deputy?
No, Emma is the expert, not just in Nottinghamshire, but across the East Midlands on the court service at the moment. And she'll bring you up to date and talk a little bit about colleagues from the court service and the position they're at. I'll just make one early point. I spoke to the Lord Chancellor just before Christmas. I spoke to Chris Philps, the Courts Minister, just at the end of last month. Both of them accept there's a problem. Both of them believe that they're making progress, but both of them readily agree that there's much more to be done, and this is a real risk, not just for the police, but for the whole of the criminal justice system. So on that, I'll hand over to Emma.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paddy. So the panel should have seen the updated report regarding the kind of current situation in Nottinghamshire. So I'm not going to speak for too long, as I realise we covered a lot of it last time, but also I want to leave time for discussion today. So unfortunately, as Christine's mentioned, our guests from the court service haven't been able to join us today, though I have been able to have some quite constructive conversations with them, not just today, and a follow-up discussion is planned, which we can discuss it, but perhaps 1 or 2 members of the panel might want to come along to that. But although they're not here, my thanks to them for their input and help in putting this paper together with updates from kind of their side as to what's being done to increase the capacity and to get the wheels of justice moving. And as ever, and as we put on the record last time, I'd just like to give our thanks to all of the staff who are doing absolutely everything that they can to achieve this. We know they're really committed to it. And the report, it's broadly positive to hear that the picture is an improving one, although, as Paddy said, there are significant challenges which still remain in the recovery process. And again, it's some of what's already come up in the discussions that we've had today, but we're already all too aware of the challenges that the criminal justice is experiencing from COVID with the initial lockdown and the social distancing requirements, which continue to make capacity a real challenge. But we also do recognise that COVID is not the standalone challenge which has made this so difficult. There are national decisions which have come into this that have made it more difficult, whether that's the cut in spending to the criminal justice service since 2010, which has meant less buildings, less staff, less sitting days, but also, and I think we touched on this last time actually, the decisions such as the officer uplift, which, although is a really welcome decision, it places additional strain on the other parts of the system which haven't seen the increasing capacity that goes alongside it. But we're 10 months in now from that initial lockdown last March, and I think it was June last year when the Chief Executive of HMCTS, along with the Lord Chancellor, went to the Justice Committee to talk about what their priorities were in tackling the backlog, which were to establish alternative accommodation, to get all of the courts open, to extend court hours, and to hear as much of the work that was suitable to be heard by audio or by video. And the report, which you've seen, details a lot about the working arrangements that they've been able to do remotely, the work that's been done to reopen the kind of court space that we've currently got in Nottinghamshire with the social distancing arrangements alongside it. And there also has been pilots of extended hours in other regions, which, hopefully will be rolled out locally. But the alternative accommodation, the so-called Nightingale Court, has nationally been the cause of quite some frustration, and HMCTS itself estimated that across England and Wales about 200 courts were going to be required, and that was back in July that that estimate was put together. And as it stands today, we've got about 20. So it's positive that we've heard, as I mentioned in the report, but it's positive to hear that there's a venue in Nottinghamshire that's under consideration. And I guess I'd just reiterate that we at the PCC's office with Craig and the force, we are here to support with any barriers, big or small, across planning, logistics, building, liaising with partners, or anything else that that we can think of to help get this moving as much as we possibly can. And the government have announced extra funds to help tackle the backlog of £275 million, but current estimates required for the extra capacity that we've talked about in the form of court space, court staffing, etc. The actual figure that we'd need to get on top of it is more like £400 million. And that would very much be just to tackle the court backlog. It wouldn't be to reflect what's needed in prisons, in probation, or any other bits of the criminal justice service. So I really hope that members of the panel continue to work with local MPs as we are here to nationally continue to keep the visibility of this issue where it needs to be. But as Paddy just said, we've got broad acceptance from a ministerial level, from police chiefs, from the Criminal Justice Joint Inspection, that there are still seriously grave concerns about the delays that are taking place in courts. And there's also an understanding that the commitment of staff is unquestionable, that some of the changes to working practices have been really positive, such as the acceleration of digital working, which has been in the offing for quite a long time now. So although, as I say, it's great to hear that we've got an improving picture, it's also clear that there's still a lot more to do. And we've had some national reports just recently highlighting the challenges that the whole criminal justice system is facing. One of the most recent being from Her Majesty's Justice Chief Inspectors, who also highlighted the ripple effect that court backlogs are having across the criminal justice agencies as a whole, and that we do need a whole system approach if we're going to achieve that whole system solution. But ultimately, we've all got one shared aim, and that's that justice is going to be properly carried out, and the cases add up to large numbers. But behind each number is a family in limbo, it's a witness at their wit's end, it's somebody waiting to clear their name. And so it's really welcome that the panel have put the focus on that for that exact reason. But I wonder if at this point, Craig, whether there's anything that you want to share in terms of observations from your perspective.
I think very well summed up. You know, justice delayed is justice denied. And I think there's a collective effort required around some of this. I think the Recorder has played an absolute blinder in pushing the Crown Courts along and has been leading the way. I'm disappointed that the representatives haven't turned up today to be able to answer some questions that I'm sure the panel had for them, but that's perhaps a debate for another day. I've read the report. I think there's some good detail in there which just actually outlines the quantum of the challenge. And there's a couple of things in there, you know, in relation to, I think there was a comment I just want a minute with regards to 3.7 on the Saturday court. The police haven't been able to resource. Well, that was an exchange. That was no greater capacity. That was swapping a day. So actually the court service have tried to reduce that slightly. So slightly misleading, I think, at 3.7. But apart from that, I think everybody understands that there's an issue here and we've got to collectively try and address it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Emma, are you content to pause at the moment while I know I've got some hands up. I've got Councillor Ellis and Mrs Harding to start with.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Emma, for that comprehensive summary. And I think I'm just going to echo a lot of what Emma and Craig have said. You know, I'm disappointed that the representatives of the court service didn't turn up today. The second time they've failed to turn up, and it is a serious issue. Between the November meeting and this meeting, of course, as Emma said, we had the Chief Inspectors of Justice report, which is actually quite slating of the system. You know, they recognise the efforts that have been made across the criminal justice system during lockdown to keep things going, and they congratulate the determined efforts of everybody to be involved. I'm sure we'd want to echo that. But these are serious inspectors, and they talk about grave concerns about the impact on the system and on victims, witnesses, and defendants. And as Craig says, justice delayed is justice denied. But it's not just justice. It's the Chief Inspector of Prisons talked about what's going on in prisons and the reduction in education, reduction of rehabilitation, the fact that they're locked down in prison, which makes it all the harder to rehabilitate and for people to come out. But I just thought it was worth just repeating what the report says. At the end, it says, as independent chief inspectors commented on the risks of chronic and systemic under-resourcing. As a chief inspectors group, we consider that COVID-19 has resulted in these risks becoming critical. So, as Emma said, it hasn't just happened over the last year. This has been going on for 10 years. That the criminal justice system has been under-resourced, denuded, and is not fit for purpose. There's one specific comment I wanted to draw on in the report. It says on 3.2, it says that the court service note there's merit in corralling most of the criminal hearings in Nottingham, since this increased flexibility and allowed the service to take a fluid approach to disposing of the cases. The question is this going to continue? There's the effect that would have on defendants and witnesses if all of the criminal justice in the county is brought to Nottingham. So that abandons the idea of local justice, locally administered. As you I think you can probably hear, Chair, I'm not impressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Emma, did you want to come back on anything at that point at all?
No, just a couple of things really. Is one is, I think, as I said, is we are having regular discussions with the court service. So it's disappointing that they're not here today. But what I would quite like to do, and as I said, you know, we can see what the appetite this is from members, is to perhaps have some members come along to some of those discussions actually, so that these questions can be put to the court service directly. And that's something that obviously we can arrange outside of this meeting. But on the point about Mansfield, I would just really echo the comments that David's already made, is that we saw a big reduction in the number of magistrates courts, which has made it really difficult in terms of responding to COVID, actually, by not having kind of the space available for additional courts to be heard. And as David said, that that also has a knock-on effect in the north of the county for access to justice ultimately.
Yeah. Thank you, Emma. If we can pick up Mrs. Harding's comments, and then I don't want us to forget Councillor Wooding's request to have a conversation about the domestic violence issues.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to say thank you for this report, and I do echo the disappointment that the three report writers weren't here today to answer questions about the report. I'm just looking at page 188, and there's a comment here about attention has now turned to reducing the delay between the date the police initiate proceedings and the first hearing at court. This delay currently stands at over 4 months. I'd like some comments on that. And also, out of court disposals, they've reduced according to the report. I'm just wondering what has happened, and is there a change in policy? If anybody would like to comment on that, please.
Emma, do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, so Suma, yes, absolutely. I think I share your concern around that date. So it's all well and good to have, let's say, selected a date, but the further that first date gets pushed into the future, the more risk of attrition and the more work for those in the system, and the worse the position is for the victim. So I totally agree with you there. And in terms of out-of-court disposals, some of that work, I think, definitely with COVID reduced. However, our commitment to out-of-court disposals is probably best endorsed by the fact that we are piloting a sergeant and 2 or 3 cops to do some more of that on a very local basis from the Bridewell. And that's had some really decent support from partners.
Thank you. Can I just come back on something else? The fact that Mansfield's closed often means that when we have cases that involve Mansfield, the actual witnesses or the defendants don't come to court in Nottingham. So consequently, the case cannot proceed. And that's why there is a delay for a different reason other than the fact that the location of the case is in Nottingham rather than Mansfield. Thank you. There's no other comments. Thank you.
That's spot on, and it's the same for remands. So sometimes we get capped at remands and we have to send them all to Nottingham, and sometimes that means that they don't all get on the first morning, particularly after the weekend, and then some are held till Tuesday. And again, that's at our risk and our cost.
If I can just say, I mean, I think it's really positive that we're looking to having a Crown Court space opening in Mansfield in the near future. I think that is a really positive development. But I think, as you've articulated, Suma, is that the lack of court hearings, whether that's been with the youth court, kind of them trying to maximise the hearings in Nottingham, it has a consequence. And whilst it might be an emergency short-term solution to do it, at the same time we need to recognise that has a long-term consequence for those people who need to be in attendance, and it's something that we should look at properly before doing anything further on.
Thank you, Emma.
Emma, did you want to pick up Councillor Wooding's question to you?
Yeah, so just in terms of domestic abuse, and I realise we talked about it kind of within the court context, but also just in a broader context as well, really. One observation which I'd just make is that We've talked about the increase in demand that our services are having. One of the places in which the demand is being felt most acutely is those domestic abuse advisors who are supporting survivors through the court process. And because that is taking longer, it inevitably means that they're having to be supported for a longer period of time. So the caseloads for court advisors at the moment is significantly higher than what we would normally want it to be, quite frankly. And that's really challenging. With regards to the calls to the helpline, what we found is that the calls to the helpline aren't necessarily new reports of domestic abuse that you would perhaps expect or would think would perhaps be ringing the police in the same way. What we're finding is that those are often ongoing cases which are exceptionally complex for services to be able to support them with. They're often long-term situations, and some of them are actually historic situations whereby the situation of lockdown and the restrictions that it's bringing have actually increased the levels of anxiety that perhaps had been to some degree resolved or were being managed to a degree, and that's made them more challenging as well. But I think there is a lot more to understand about domestic abuse over the course of the last year. I mean, one of the things you mentioned was that we did see a dip in calls during lockdown, but certainly with the last lockdowns is we've seen that as we come out of lockdown, there is an increase in terms of the demand. So I think that that's, you know, realistically is a very real prospect this time round as well, and it's something that we've got to be prepared of. But the others is that there's other kind of differences in terms of those who are making calls at the moment to those who might have done last year. So for example, again, something that the helpline has recognised is that there are more calls, there are more people seeking refuge from situations where there's no children involved, whereas those where there are children, it's a family household, they are less likely to be seeking refuge at the moment. And obviously there's, you know, conclusions that you can draw with that, but I think there needs to be much more done to understand exactly what's been happening. And the other is, you know, obviously we've managed to have some support from MOJ over the last year to help with that additional amount of demand for services. The challenges that we've had with that, and this was something that was brought up with the Domestic Abuse Commissioner previously, was that money was short term. It has to be spent by the end of the year. It has to be spent by the end of the financial year, and it can only be spent on this. It can't be spent on this, and it just put additional strains on services who are already under increased pressure at the moment. This week we have seen a national announcement for money for next year of about £40 million for victim services, but we haven't had that broken down into local figures just yet, so we're not sure exactly what we're going to be getting. But it's that issue of having long-term, secure, sustainable funding which allows services to be able to respond to survivors.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Smith as well wanting to ask a question.
Could I just come back on that point?
Yes, by all means, Councillor Woodings.
I just wanted to say it's really helpful analysis to the helpline, but I would be really interested to know the breakdown in the increase in the overall calls between, as you said, complex cases and repeat calls. Something, you know, what were long term, what were historic, and what were new, so that we can actually have a real understanding of what was happening. And I do think as well, we have got domestic violence in the work programme for the March meeting, so we can perhaps have a bit better, perhaps we can have that information for then. One of the figures we always used to get reported here at Police and Crime Commissioners panel was repeat domestic violence reports. And so if we could have that for the March meeting for the year of, 2020, from April to now, or for the last 12 months, I think the repeats figure is what we've always measured the success of our support services on. And I appreciate it's been a difficult year and those figures might have increased, but I just think we need to have our reality glasses on so we can understand exactly what the cause is of people calling in, so that we can, make sure our services are responding to that to that, and that we're actually putting in the right steps. I know from Nottingham City Homes they've increased the amount of sanctuary schemes, so perhaps we could have, you know, I may be able to get the stats for that, the increase in sanctuary that we managed, which is sort of like secure measures that you put in somebody's home to keep them safe in their homes. So I just think perhaps we could have a bit of a fuller picture at the March meeting, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Woodens. It might be helpful if you perhaps pick that up and have a more detailed conversation with the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. But I think, Emma, you've got the gist of what was being requested. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just following on from that my colleagues just said, it'd be interesting, Emma, if at the next meeting we could have a breakdown also of the figures of male victims of domestic violence, because I know it does happen both ways, and you know, male victims are one that do sometimes get overlooked because it doesn't happen as much. But I am aware that the incidence of male victims is increasing as well. So it'd be interesting to get those statistics, to see what the percentage increase is in that. And again, like my colleague said, I'm sorry, I'm useless with names, who just spoke and said, be interesting to look at what's repeat and what are new, the number of new in relation to domestic abuse on all sides.
Absolutely. Sorry, just to come back, yes, more, you know, we'll be able to bring those figures. That's no problem. It is just with making sure that the panel know that we do commission a male survivors support line, as well as the helpline which Juno Women's Aid provide, Equation provide the men's service, and they have reported an increase in the amount of calls that they're getting. I think as you said, you know, the volume of calls is quite significantly lower than that for the other helpline, but there's still been an increase, and I'm more than happy to bring those figures to the next meeting as well.
Yes, well, as you know, it is on the work programme for an update anyway, so thank you very much for that. Can I check if there's any other comments on the report about the courts that people would want to raise? If not, then perhaps Keith, on the panel's behalf, perhaps you could write a letter to the people who didn't attend today, thanking them for the contribution to the report that they made, but also expressing how disappointed we were that once again they've not been able to attend. And I think members will probably want to have an update of where we are at our next meeting, and if there's anything else we can do to support the Commissioner, then perhaps we can pick that up outside the meeting. So if there are no further questions, can the recommendations be agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Are there any abstentions or anything else? No, thank you. Well, thank you, that is carried. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Can I thank everyone for attending? I'll close the meeting and hope you all stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
There.